Hello, I'm M K Srinivas. I am discussing about the Transfer of Property Act 1882, the salient features of the Act, the amendments, and the definitions of immovable property attestation and notice is also discussed in this 40 minutes of video. It would be helpful if you understand from the basics of this origin of this act. The codification of law with regard to transfer of property. The compact law with regard to transfer of immovable property was for the first time introduced in the country in a codified form in the year 1882. Prior to passing of this act, the law relating to transfer of property act was hopelessly chaotic. The High Courts of India appear to have laid some diametrically opposite principles till the matter attracted the notice of Privy Council. Tambu Swami versus Hussain Rothan, number 1 Madras, 1 Privy Council. Till such time, this act was vigorously advocated the codification of law on the subject with which the present act now deals. The Indian Succession Act 1856 deals with the testamentary and intestate. There is one R has crept mistakenly, intestate succession. Then Contract Act 1872, wherein we discuss agreement which is legally applicable becomes a contract. Then Sales of Goods Act 1930 deals with the movable property, and Transfer of Property Act deals with the immovable property. When a movable property or goods is transferred from one living person to another living person, the law applied is the Sales of Goods Act 1930. When property is transferred from dead person to living persons, the law applied is the law of succession. When a person dies leaving a testate or a will, the law applied is testamentary succession. When a person dies intestate, dies without a testate or a will, the law applied is intestate succession. When an immovable property is transferred from one living person to another living person, the law applied is Transfer of Property Act 1882. It is inter vivos. The Transfer of Property Act was passed in 1882 and came into force from 1st July 1882. It mainly deals with the transfer of immovable property and also movable property between two living persons. The transfer inter vivos, the Act does not apply to transfers by operation of law, that is succession, court, sales, insolvency, etc. It contains 137 sections divided into 8 chapters. The kernel of bill, which became the Transfer of Property Act 1882, was a draft prepared in England by the Indian Law Commission, which was constituted in 1870 by the Duke of Orgy. See, the salient features, scope and application of this act is only applicable within India only. For example, Indian Penal Code, it is applicable even outside India also. Where a citizen of India has committed a crime outside India, he will be punished as according to IPC of Indian soil. Within two people, that is inter vivos, that is also one of the important key factor in this Transfer of Property Act. Next. Transfer of properties between parties only, not legal like insolvency, auction, etc. Mostly deals with immovable property. Exception are section 5 to section 37, when it also includes the movable property. Chapter 2, that is section 5 to 53A and section 129 relating to gifts not applicable to memorial law. The Act does not apply to transfers of operation by law, as I told you earlier, succession, court sales and insolvency, etc. Chapter 1, containing the section 1 to 4, deals with the preliminary aspects. Chapter 2, containing the sections 5 to 53a, lays down the provisions relating to general principles. Chapter 3 to 8, enlisted under Part 2, containing sections 54 to 137, deal with the specific transfers, namely sale, mortgage, lease, exchange, gift, etc. It is significant to note that the Act nowhere defined what is transfer of property. It merely defines the word transfer under Section 5. Transfer of property may be explained under the following categories: transfer of movable and immovable property, transfer inter vivos between two living persons, and transfers from one dead person to one more living person, thus is succession, and voluntary transfers and involuntary transfers. These are all the three prominent heads we have to talk about this transfer of property. The Transfer of Property Act mainly deals with the transfer of immovable property. As stated above, some of the sections also deal with movable property. Section 5 to 37 of the Chapter 2 are applicable where the property is immovable or movable. Chapter 3 to 4, containing section 54 to 107, deal with the immovable properties only. This is very, very important that 54 to 117 sections deal with immovable property only. Chapter 6 to 8, containing sections 118 to 137, are applicable to both immovable and movable properties. With regard to the second category, the Act deals with the first part, that is transfer inter vivos, while the transfers from dead person to living person, persons are governed by the Indian Succession Act, that is law of inheritance. This does not include inheritance, insolvency, forfeiture, sale of execution of decree, or by will. These are all the main actions which will not deal in this Transfer of Property Act, whereas this includes sale, mortgage, gift, exchange, and charge. The Transfer of Property Act 1882 is general law on transfer of property. It has to be read with Indian Registration Act, Stamp Act, and Indian Contract Act for complete knowledge. What property means? The Transfer of Property Act does not define the word property. It considers property which is usually so meant and considered. Normal meaning of the term is more or less identical. Ownability and transferability are inherent qualities that constitute a property. In simple words, the property in common sense includes physical property, corpus, that is tangibles. This may be 1. Immovables, number 2. Movables, number 3. Chattels, and other in possession and in action. Reality and personality is also a part of this physical property. Number 2, intellectual property, that is mental, intangibles, Copyright Act, Patent Act, Designs Act, Trade and Merchandise Act, Biodiversities, etc. provides for the Intellectual Property Act, that is IPR. According to Salman, the well-known jurisprudent, property can be divided into two main kinds and shown as jura in re proria, jura in alienea. Property may be divided into two classes, namely again, that is movable property and immovable property. The law of property deals with the proprietary rights in rem, that is the world. An owner of the property possesses proprietary rights which are not included his personal rights. There is a lot of differences between these two rights. Proprietary rights include persons, estate or property, land, chattels, shares, debts due to him, etc. Personal rights include person's status, personal conditions, life, liberty, reputation, etc. The law of property is the law of proprietary rights in rem. The law of proprietary rights in personam is the law of obligations. Corporeal property is the narrowest sense of property. Corporeal mean having a body. It means the right of ownership exists in a material object, that is, building, flat, pen, computer, etc. A property is a material object subject to immediate power of a person.